Hi, I'm Erin Larkin and I'm here with John Jens, and we today are looking at 10 of Australasia's top Pinots in our mind, and we split it over 2 videos so we can really dive deep into 5 per video. This is the first 5. Just before you launch into the Pinot discussion, this is a tasting that John does at the restaurant at Lamont's in Cottesloe every year. 20 of Australasia's greatest Pinots. And so we've just picked 10 of them today. The tasting is on in 2 hours. So we're looking at all 20 in 2 hours. But these are the top 10. So John, Pinot.
Okay. I've got no idea. Where do we start? So 20 years ago and further back, Australian Pinot hardly existed, and what was there wasn't great. And they were wonderful by Australian standards, but not on a world standard and not by an international standard. So then the New Zealanders came in and took the market. From the early 90s, escarpment vineyards in Martinborough in New Zealand, Martinborough vineyards, dominated the Australian shows that would allow New Zealand Pinots into them. Got the highest scores, perhaps 3 years in a row, 3 vintages in a row, and also picked up the trophy for the best Pinot in 2 of those 3 shows in the early 90s. Perhaps 91, 2 and 3 from memory at Sydney. The wines were a revelation to Australians. We'd never seen stuff like that. They were delicious and lovely. I preferred the standard to their special and more expensive version, because it was a little bit fresher. And then as the years went by, as the rest of the New Zealanders came on board, on both islands, both north and south, the wines were delicious, textural, long, balanced, and I think probably better than anything that we'd seen. They dominated the quality and the volumes. Australia had a tiny proportion of Pinot in the ground, while the New Zealanders were pumping ever-increasing quantities in geometrical increases of volumes into the Australian wine market. And the Australians, despite the fact that the market was growing exponentially, I think between about 2003 and 2008, increased our entire vineyard area in Pinot Noirs by only 7 or 8%. And that while the New Zealanders had multiplied their sales into Australia by perhaps 15, I'm going to guess now because I'm not quite sure, 15 or 20 times. Australians were behind the 8 ball. But by 2009, 2010, the great and unique, and we don't have one here now, Bas Philippe, fought back, and despite the fact they'd always had marvellous Australasian Pinots, they did have cork problems, and many of the bigger wine buyers here in Perth in Western Australia loved Bas Philippe, but they weren't, at the end they gave up. They weren't prepared to accept the cork taint rate. By 2009, 2010, Philip Jones had all of that sorted out, and by then the wines were spectacular. I reckon in 2010 and 2012, James Halliday gave 99 points, his first ever 99 point to an Australian table wine, to the 2010 reserve. Sure, at $500 a bottle, only tiny quantities, and then 99 points again 2 years later, I think. And then that lovely wine magazine that you think is spectacular, Fine Wine Magazine, which is truly a great magazine, did an article on Australasian Pinot Noirs, perhaps, I'm guessing a little bit now, 2013, 2014, great article where they said that Bas Philippe, in a lineup of Australasian Pinot Noirs, including the Adorangi's, the Felton Road, perhaps Lawson and Dry Hills, perhaps Mount Difficulty, that sort of stuff, some of the single vineyards, were the best vineyards were the best Pinots in Australasia, and I reckon they were. At that stage, they were astonishing. They were head and shoulders above anything in Australia. Bas Philippe is great, truly great.
I just tried the 2016 Bas Philippe Reserve maybe 2 months ago. It's pretty spectacular. Like, I sort of went into it.
You didn't mention that to me.
Sorry, but I went into it.
She just lost a friend.
I went into it thinking it's going to be good, but it's now $650. It better be
2016.
Yeah, it better
I'll come back on that.
Be exceptional, and it was not just exceptional. It was also incredibly distinctive and quite a unique wine. It's got a really strong personality, and for me, when I'm buying wine and drinking wine, that's really something that I search for, because I look at so much wine, and so many wines can be great alongside each other, but quite similar. And this wine really isn't similar to anything else and really speaks clearly of its place. But on top of that is just a brilliant wine. So the next time I get the opportunity to try that again, I will. Maybe here one day. Right.
Okay. I know we've got other things to talk about, but I just want to touch on this. Philip Jones, who's an extraordinary character and a great man and a great winemaker, truly great winemaker. I did spend quite a bit of time with him when the 15 and 16s were being released over a series of tastings. And he said that despite the fact that the Yarra and other areas in Victoria were saying that 15 and 17 were the great vintages, he said that people in Victoria didn't realise that East Gippsland was a long way away from the Yarra Valley and hours away from the Yarra Valley, and that in his opinion, the 16s were better. He thought the 16s were a great vintage for him, and I thought they were absolutely outstanding. And the more reasonably priced, the estate wines, that sort of stuff, at well under $100 were just marvellous value. If you're a Pinophile and you love Australasian Pinots, find Bass Phillip.
You must. Okay. And the estate wine, again, I just had the 18 not that long ago. Sorry again. Twice in 2 days, actually. It was a Sunday night and then a Monday night. Have I got a black eye? Am I missing something? And I looked at them. I looked at I looked at it blind the first time and then unmasked the second time. And I just could not believe the purity of the wine when I looked at it without knowing what it was. I was like, what the hell is this wine? It is super special. And then it was...
What the hell is this wine? What the hell's going on here? Look at all these great wines that God. Anyway, whatever it is, I can take it. What's next?
Lucky.
Okay. Yes, that's great though. Enviable.
Oh, it was very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have in wine number 1, the Crittendon Estate Couer Pinot Noir from Mornington Peninsula. So Couer, this is their premium range at about $80 a bottle, I'm going to guess.
Yep.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it tastes. John's going to tell us a little bit about the wine or the estate. This is really creamy, red fruited and pure. It's super pretty. In my tasting notes, because we looked at all of these wines prior just to get a handle on them before we got going, and this has got a really fine bone structure to this wine. This is not heavy, dense, fruit concentrated and forward. This is like kind of fine, elegant, relaxed and savorily spiced. Like exotic market spice, 5 spice kind of thing. Really super pretty.
Savorily spiced. I'm learning new things all the time here. But we understand what you mean and we know it sums it up perfectly. So in about 2008, I first do a Rollo Crittendon's Pinot Noirs. And by the way, we don't rehearse any of these. And even until this morning, we didn't know what wines we were doing. Nothing's prepared here. But 2008, I saw my first, that was from the 2008, I saw the first vintages of Rollo Crittendon's Pinot Noirs. Couldn't believe them. There were only 4 or 5 producers of great Pinot Noir, in my mind, in Australia at that time. I reckon he has a sympathetic nature, an empathetic nature in understanding Pinot and what needs to be done with oak. It's not like the French style. It's a more modern New World style. To me, it's gentle, soft, elegant, long, very, very soft, refined tannins, less oxidised, so less oak handling, I'd assume, than the Burgundian styles, but by Australian standards, enormous length, very classy and delicious. I like it very much, but not only that, I think that his more reasonably priced wines, a number of the wines that he has in the 40, 50, the Zuma, these sort of things, in most vintages in the $50 to $60 price range, punch beyond their weight. Absolutely delicious, well worth having.
Agree. And outside of this Pinot, the only other wine I've had from the Couer range is the Sauvignon.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty smart. Very smart, actually. Very esoteric. If you're not into Sauvignon, it probably won't work, but it's really beautiful. Very exciting wine. So
I've got a couple of bottles, but I haven't tried it yet.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty out there, but it's perfect. Okay, moving into our second glass, we have the 2017 Mount Mary Pinot Noir from the Yarra Valley. So we've been talking a little bit about Mount Mary recently. I make no apologies for that. We have I'm a newcomer. John's very much an old timer with Mount Mary, but no offence with the old timer comment, but I just...
Badge of honour.
good. I have just been utterly astounded by them across all levels, actually. And, this is another wine I've just had without you recently, but completes the picture of Mount Mary Pinot, is an older 2006 Pinot, and it was just beautiful. It had moved into that kind of fresh field mushroom, sort of really gentle spice. The tannins had really softened and rounded. It was just an incredible wine, and it was really only, in a gentle hill of its life, and I just really loved it. I was really pleased to see it, so that was a great honour. But anyway, to the wine that we have today. So these are aerating really nicely in these big glasses. So we're drinking out of, just a side note, we're drinking out of the Riedel, I think they're called the XL Oregon Pinot glass. And I almost never use varietal specific glasses, but if you're going to do it, Pinot and Oat Chardonnay are the two to go to. So for Oat Chardonnay, I use the Veritas Oaked Burgundy, and for Pinot, I have these. And it's making a really big difference to the wine in the glass, because when we first poured them, they look very different to how they do now. So this is like, in my notes, it's super pretty. So this is like strawberry, pomegranate, raspberry. It's got all these really pretty sort of rounded, soft fruit characters on the front. But the thing that sets this apart from being just a simple fruity wine, which is how it may come across to you as I'm speaking about it, but it's got this really fine, lingering length, and the acid just kind of weaves its way through the fruit. It's incredibly elegant, and I think that you might miss this if you didn't spend some time to sit still enough to look at it, because it's poised and it's just focused and long, so long. So those are things that I really think you need to look out for in wine, is focus and length of flavour, and John's always been big on the length of flavour is the key to quality, but that is absolutely what this wine speaks of here.
Okay, so it doesn't make any difference whether it's the Cabernets or the Chardonnays or the Pinots. Mount Mary does get length of flavour. Erin and I come at these descriptions from very different angles, and hopefully that can add something to the overall picture. So this is soft, modern, gentle, long, classy and fine. The new modern world style. This is more traditional. Long, drying, more structuring tannins, and slightly more tighter tannins at the moment, which gives it that structuring, and then the length and the drying finish and aftertaste. But I too have had some of the older versions, and they are magnificent. And it's possible that not everyone would put Mount Mary into a taste-off of younger Australian or Australasian Pinot Noirs, but I think we're both putting them in because we've seen the older ones and we know what they can develop into, and they develop wonderfully. Sometimes I just taste them, either these or the Chardonnays, and I just think, wow, these are just wonderful. I like Mount Mary a lot. This is well within Sam Middleton's time.
Yes.
So, and Sam is a great winemaker. We've discussed Sam before. I like him, not that I've only met him once and spent some hours with him, but I just think that the wines that he's making are wonderful. Very, very good.
I couldn't agree.
And we'll get better and better. I think we'll be still improving when this is mellowing and slowing down.
Yes, yes. Well, but so the 6 that I looked at, so 14 years old, really it hadn't hit its middle peak yet. There was still lots of primary fruit and stuff. So I think if we can bank on sort of a 30-year timeline from birth to death, I would suggest, then yeah, they're pretty amazingly well lived. And I'm sure that it will go for longer than that if cellared correctly, but that's just a off-the-cuff drinking window. And the more that I drink of Mount Mary, the more I'm sort of trying to make space for them in my very limited space that I have in my wine fridge, because I think they're expensive, but they're incredibly beautiful and they're really long lived. And there's a tannin management thing that is like starting to me to appear like a house style. Like it's just so fine. And John, a couple of videos ago, used the term willowy, and I just think that's exactly an accurate descriptor of Mount Mary tannin management in the reds.
I'd also suggest that these two are both, in certain ways, typical of their regions. The Mornington Peninsula does make a softer, gentler style of Pinot than most areas in Australia, and of the people that I deal with and sell wines to, and there's a few of them, I think that in general, unless you're an absolute, Pinot fanatic or zealot, then most people do tend to moving towards that softer, gentler, fruit-driven and textural Mornington style as compared to the more classically styled, perhaps, Yarra Valley styles. Is that a fair comment or not? Maybe classic is not the right word, but they do age marvellously, and these do too, but these are the crowd pleasers in the way that I see it. Anyway, yep.
Now, moving on to our third wine, we've got one of the top of the triangle from New Zealand. This is the Adorangi. So this is a 2017 Adorangi. We looked at the 16 as well, just for posterity, to make sure that we were choosing the correct vintage to show you today, and we both came up, tasted them separately, and both pointed this slightly above the 16. Now, I have been trying Adorangi with you for like 8 or 9 years, so really not a long time in the context of the winery, but certainly something that really has stuck out to me from the beginning to now is the incredibly distinctive nose on Adorangi. It's almost odd. It's like spicy and layered. It's kind of like the individual notes on a xylophone. Like they're all there and they're all in sync, but they're all completely different to each other. And there's like looking at this lineup and smelling them side by side, the two Kiwis have a real different character to them. It's almost a meatiness, like a gentle meatiness, which is really quite appealing. The thing that I love about Adorangi is it smells really delicate and layered and interesting, and like I say, it's got all those interesting characters, but on the palate it's incredibly concentrated. It's like almost a joke how much flavour is inside of it, which I really like. Like you get it in your mouth and you're like, oh, that's right, that's why Adorangi is one of the best, because they just seem to pack so much in to a very fine frame. Maybe it's just that Adorangi formed some of my very early Pinot memories, so I feel quite attracted to that style, but it's got density and concentration of fruit. There's an unbelievable amount of spice in there. I mean, I said exotic market spice before, it has that. It's got 5 spice, there's curls of saffron and pepper and all of the good things. It's got anise and licorice and etc., all the things. But it's also kind of creamy and quite plush, and it fills your mouth to the sides of the palate. I can still taste it even while I'm talking. So yeah, I am once again quite astounded by this very unique and distinctive Martinborough Pinot.
Okay. I've got a problem. I'm an Adorangi fanatic. I remember I've hosted with Helen Masters, the winemaker over there, 5 different tastings here in Perth in Western Australia, in probably 5 of the 6 tastings here in Perth in Western Australia that she's hosted. I reckon, and we've been doing these tastings for a long time. We've been doing the 20 of Australasia's best Pinots for probably, well, as long as Aaron's been alive, probably 35 years, 40 years, and I love it. I reckon Adorangi are fantastic. Now, this is going to sound heretical, perhaps after what Aaron said, but also in what I've just said there. I don't think Adorangi is good. I reckon Adorangi is sensational. You line them in any masked lineup of Australasian Pinots, masked, and they shine. In my opinion, they shine. I love them. I love the way that Aaron described it just then. I agree with all of that. The packed flavour, there's not vibrant, youthful fruit. It's complete, I won't say forward, but round and worked flavours, just adding flavour. Now, here's the heretical bit. I reckon that 2017, which this is, has been on the market for some time. I reckon there's a reason it's been on the market for some time. I will add that in Perth, Western Australia, I asked their national agent, the national agent's representative, how much of the Adorangi Pinot that came into Western Australia my store down at Lamont's purchased, and he just thought for a second. That was in front of Helen Masters, their winemaker, and he said, "Oh, about 70%." So I'm a New Zealand wine fanatic, and I'm an Adorangi fanatic. I have bought very little of the 17.
Why?
Because I just think this is a touch duller. I know I shouldn't be saying this now, but I'm saying that the other wines I love. I'm looking forward to the 18 because I don't want to damn a wine because I reckon Adorangi is great. I think, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on a video, but my view is this is the least exciting of the Adarangis that I've seen. Sorry about that. In time, but please don't get me wrong. I reckon Adarangi is sensational, but I've seen quite a few bottles of it, and I don't care if it's 13, 14, 15, 16. I don't care if it's 2003. I'm looking forward to the 2018. Sorry, I'm a retailer. I've got to put it straight to my customers. That's the way I see it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and we all know that everyone's got different views on wine. I want to see a touch more life in that wine that I'm seeing now. This is a half bottle, so I'm not quite sure if that plays a part in it or not. I don't mean to be rude.
This is going off-piste, but if you were to compare that vintage expression with another,
yes,
what would you align that with?
A much greater life. Same sort of characters, but with much greater life in them, and a touch more youthfulness and freshness on the finish.
But so 17 is similar to another vintage, do
you
reckon?
No, I don't have an answer on that.
Okay.
No, I don't know. But the overall flavours and structures which you talk about would be the way I normally describe it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. At least we agree on something great. So keeping in New Zealand, but in a slightly different area, we're in central Otago with the Felton Road Block 3, vintage 2017. So we looked again at the 16 just to be sure, and here we are. These two wines have a similar, whilst being wildly different, have got a similarity to them which sets them apart from their Australian counterparts, and I quite like that. You know you're getting into New Zealand when you're in them. This has got, I guess that's the oak. There's some like coffee grounds and sort of spice and things on the nose that sit in front of the fruit for me. Certainly I always love this Block 3, and the Cornish Point's quite brilliant in other vintages as well, but Felton Road's Felton Road. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's again, incredibly distinctive. Maybe Pinot draws that out of the ground really quite well. This is same story, beautiful red fruit on the front of the palate, bolstered by really interesting and exotic spice, with a really long palate, and that is why we buy it. Really long and unfurling is my thoughts on Felton Road Block 3.
Okay, so as far back as the early 80s, I was bringing serious quantities, 400, 500 cases at a time, into Perth, into Western Australia, from New Zealand, because I just believed in the place. In those days, the winemaking wasn't great, but the fruit was sensational. By the early 1990s, we were bringing in Collards, Couer River, Villa Maria, Neudorf, Martinborough Vineyards, Hunters, Lebrun Sparklings, and that was from the early 90s when almost no one in Australia knew anything about New Zealand Pinots or New Zealand wines. So I'm a Pinot fanatic. Over the years, I've sold more Felton Road and more Adorangi than anyone else in Western Australia. I believe in them totally. We've sold much more of the material from Ostlers, from Amersfield in some years. We've had the greatest quantities.
Do you know who I want you to bring in? Who I love, who we're not tasting today, and I never get to see them anywhere near enough, but I would just love it if someone in Perth actually brought them over. Maybe they do now. Ripon.
Oh, okay.
Ripon. The Tinkersfield Pinot is one of my favourites, and we just don't see it here. You can buy it from online retailers and from the winery and such, but, where's the presence?
Like, are you starting to get the impression that I'm getting left out of all of these wines? I haven't tried the Tinkersfield. It's okay, I can take it.
It's really good. I bought it when I was at Ripon, so that I can be excused for that. And if you think that I'm wrong, or you know that I'm wrong, and there is someone bringing it into Perth or someone selling it in Perth, please contact me and tell me, because I love those wines.
And the Ripon vineyards are stunningly...
Oh my God, they're beautiful. It's on Lake Wanaka, and it's sensational. Like, if you haven't, just Google it. Google Ripon Vineyard, Lake Wanaka, NZ. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, we're running out of time, so we have to talk about Felton Road and then the last one.
Okay, thank you. So with the Felton Road, we get a lot of Felton Road, still a lot of Felton Road. The best wines are Block 3, Block 5, and sometimes more recently Cornish Point, which sometimes matches them now perhaps, among New Zealand's and Australia's superstars. Like this, these are perennially amongst Australia's greatest, or Australia's greatest Pinot Noirs. Block 3, to me, more powerful, more structured, always released 4 or 5 months earlier. 13 six-packs, usually about is Western Australia's allocation. Strong, powerful, structured, but in a light, refined, lingering way. They just keep going and going and going. As compared to the Block 5, which won't be released for another couple of months yet. This is September now. October now. Won't be released for September. Won't be released for a short while, and even classier and more refined, but equal great length. Love this style. My customers love it. Ages magnificently.
One more question before we move on to the Giaconda. If the state allocation is 13 six-packs, how many do you reckon you get? 12.
I'm not allowed to say.
Pretty close. Okay, Geoconda. So we're going to talk about the last one in the lineup, John, and I'm really impressed and excited to see that you brought it because I didn't know that you were going to include it, so thank you very much. It's always a treat to try a Geoconda. It's hard to get, so thank you. You get that from a wine store in Perth, maybe?
Swanbourne Cellars, but I didn't have any myself, over in a very lovely group of guys. Yep.
They are, and that's where we've got the Chardonnay from too, so thanks, Swanee, for getting them in. The thing that I think is so distinctive about this wine in this glass now, but also when I was doing the notes prior, was like the Chardonnay, we've looked at the Chardonnay twice or 3 times now in video, and I think that they're so worked and complex. There's so much going on top of the fruit, which is something that I don't normally necessarily like to see, but in the context of Giaconda, they just do it so well. This smells like really high quality oak at the moment. There's like coffee ground and kind of spice and all these things on top of the red fruit profile that it has. So I just love this wine. I find it quite unusual in a very, very good way. It's like olive tapenade and a really interesting acid profile actually. It's kind of like cooling and weaves its way through the fruit. I love it. It's the 17 Giaconda.
Legendary Victorian vineyard, crowd favourite around the country, Chardonnays, Pinots, and a couple of other things as well. Legendary winemaker, Rick Kingsborough, legendary, and that's one of the few legends in the country. In the Chardonnays, I preferred the 18 to the 17 by a whisker.
Yeah.
Be interested to see the 18 on this one. This is the 2017, so I'll look forward to that to see if it's the same thing. 3 of these are the New World style, moving towards the traditional French style in the way that they do things, ages magnificently. This guy I would have picked as being the French wine in the lineup if I was told there was one. Lean, long and starker than some of the others, but still with enough weight, enormous length, really interesting and delicious flavours, brilliant finish, brilliant aftertaste. I really like it. I find it hard to pick between the wines in terms of points. They're very similar. These are the greatest, amongst the greatest Pinots in Australasia. There's that much in between them. It's just nothing. There's not one I say, whoa, that is clearly the best. Lovely wine. Beautifully done.
I find it hard to rank them as well, actually. I can tell you that my points really differed only by half a point to a point. Actually, in this bracket, they're all very good, but they're all excellent. But it really is so mood related, because I think that this is the most comforting and pleasurable and beautiful because it's kind of soft and there's a lyrical kind of red fruit thing that happens and it's just totally gorgeous. This is not comfortable at all. This is a thinker's wine. There's a lot going on in this glass. This is like something that I think probably needs a decant for a start. It's incredibly complex and layered. This is a beautiful wine, but this is not a comfort wine. This is like a seriously cool, edgy, complex wine. And then there's these guys. And between them, I think I prefer the Ata Rangi by a whisker, even though you say that it's not as life-giving and all of those things.
Thank God.
I just find Ata Rangi to be so distinctively Ata Rangi, and that brings me great pleasure. So, I mean, it's really about your preferred style of Pinot, and Pinot does, much like Riesling, it really mainlines the dirt and talks a lot about the terroir of the place that it's from and the hand that made it. So in that sense, it's a really beautiful grape to drink. Look, this is wrapping up part 1 of part 2 of Australasia's greatest Pinots, and we're really only looking at a little snapshot of those. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Subscribing gives me the energy to come back and do this, and we love doing this. We've got a lot more in the tank, so please do, and we will see you for the next one.
God bless.